My name is Faustus Blanton. I am a professor at one of the major universities in the world. My name is a pseudonym because I would like to keep my anonymity about what I do and where I work a secret. Who I am and what I do at this college is unimportant to what I am going to reveal to you in this video, as I will be revealing to you the greatest discovery I have ever laid eyes on. Let me explain before you leave this video, or it becomes of no interest to you, because what I am about to share with you has major, and I repeat major, implications for the world. As a physics professor, not only do I have a firmly established grasp on physics but also relativity and mathematics. As such, we rarely come across information from submissions from so-called wannabe crackpot science papers and the like. 2 years ago a colleague and I were discussing possible inclusions into our academia, or any evidence that might break the humdrum day-to-day routine of everyday Einstein science that seems to be going nowhere. Initially, we got so fed up we began to wonder why science did not seem to advance in areas of gravity, space travel and so on. So we got together on our days off and literally scanned hundreds and thousands of online documents from crackpottery to suggestive theories and very good candidates, which we read, rejected and reread. The search continued and we looked and looked and looked. Sorry to say, but we were just on the verge of giving up until just recently when a strange new paper rose from the ashes, actually published recently on Vixra.org. We were both shocked and bewildered at the same time, because this paper gave the very keys to identifying the source of gravity itself. The paper, literally by an unknown, is a man by the name of Mark Cater. Who is Mr. Cater? Mark has no formal schooling. In fact, Mark cannot even do math, according to the way it is taught. He taught himself. After reading his paper, we immediately wrote a letter to Mr. Cater and informed him of who we were and our intentions. He said to our amazement that the paper, to mind you, the first called Aleodeology, a synonym for a solvent to Einstein's work, gave us indication that he just wanted the paper spread to anyone willing to take it and run, with the stipulation that he be named as the originator of the information as titled Mark S. Cater. After the conversation, me and my colleague listening in on the other line, we were both puzzled and overjoyed. It meant the beginning of a fantastic discovery, a new age in which man can finally achieve those long sought-after dreams science has been seeking low these many decades. So, here I am making this video, and as you listen you will discover as we did the secret that will blow everything out of the water, so take some time and just listen. Or if you'd like, we'll prove the full link as the end of this video. Thank you for your attention, and here it begins. Faustus Blanton.
Aleodeology by Mark Cater. The idea has come up of lately that space has time only with respect to energy. Energy as it stands is manually based and its measurements rely primarily upon values, which differs extremely from symbols based with respect to the true source of information itself. This form of information encompasses massive amounts of data that cannot be handled with conventional means and differs from knowledge. What is being measured is velocity/speed with respect to space over a predetermined distance in an amount of time over this distance. As the manual push action propagates the mass or system of masses through space, interaction with space is negligible. That is all that is occurring. Time then is more a function of energy with respect to space rather than a property of space, although space accommodates energy to operate through it geometrically. force as depicted by Newton is merely energy transfer from a manually based source, and therefore the source is the force. This source cannot compensate for potential energy, which automatically becomes established with the establishment of manual energy input producing a repetitious output to maintain a velocity or a change in velocity. By repetitious input producing a repetitious output, it is meant that repeated input is required to maintain velocity or change in velocity in order to avoid the automatic establishment of potentiality against the manual establishment of energy. With respect to the mass, potential energy impedes the mass from self-acceleration, thereby requiring the input of energy transfer from the manual source to be repetitious. Otherwise, absent of this repetitious input, potential energy would result bringing the mass back to rest. Irrespective of whether the mass experiences uniform velocity/speed or acceleration, manual input of energy to the mass must always be repetitious to avoid the feedback of potential energy when manual energy is applied to the system. The only difference being with acceleration is that of more power being required to be put into the system to perpetuate to output of the system incrementally. Thus, manual input of energy to a system to produce the output through the manual input seen by an external observer is plagued by the automatic result of feedback of potential energy from the system, necessitating repetitious input of energy to evade feedback from the system's energy input. Feedback, as it is seen, is related to the mass itself with respect to gravity in that it can be deemed as gravity, for there is no identification as to where it originates. We can comprehend this when we imagine a system at rest and its buoyancy in outer space, apart from the rotations of the planet and sun. So we can estimate to a small degree that the rotation of Earth and the Sun are at least partly responsible for this, while in outer space the system is detached from the pull associated with the larger mass's elliptical revolution as well as the Sun's own pull upon Earth, leaving the system to float or be constantly pushed forward, producing slower than light velocities but eventual breakdown of the system. All measurements are value-based, originating from energy manually established observations. Because these value-based measurements of energy are manual, they are therefore self-referential and are not dependable for realizing highly advanced technologies that can be accomplished. Thus, there is no real interaction with space. There is only geometric propagation of the energy or the system propagated by manual energy through space. Thereby, space is not a function of time. Rather, time is a function of energy with respect to it as it is manually established. If the word line, a path in Einstein's space-time, a term used by government-hired scientists in a variety of ways to unify two components into one force or concept representing very different phenomena, similar to unifying the words grandma with a cyborg into grandborg. That is, energy and mass can be unified into one word as energy mass or mass energy to describe their interpretation of energy transfer without looking at the two phenomena as interdependent, much of which is false and should be rejected regardless of scientific seniority or credentials. For example, gravitons. Another false word, unification of particle and gravitation of a moving particle, is parameterized thus: T, X, T, Y, T, Z, T. We can obtain the for velocity of the particle. 1. dx/dt, d/dt, dozen/dt. The t-axis or time axis velocity component is 1, a dimensionless number. Now there are relativists who will insist that it is perfectly acceptable to express measures velocity in time with a dimensionless number, but the rest of us with our head on our shoulders know that it is not true. We know that a dimensionless number such as 1 has absolutely no meaning in as far as expressing velocity or any sort of change. Velocity must be given in units of velocity such as meters per second, or whatever standard of units a user audience handles. For this reason, there is no motion in so-called unified Einsteinian space-time. There are people who will insist that there is nothing wrong with saying that motion in time occurs at the rate of 1 second per second. First of all, dt/dt does not equal 1 second per second. The units cancel out. Second, dt/dt is always the same, 1, regardless of the actual rate of velocity. Note that I put for velocity in quotes above. This is because it is not a velocity at all, since nothing can move in space-time. There is only 3 velocity in 3D space, dx/dt, d/dt, dozen/dt, t being a mere evolution parameter. True for velocity, dw/dt, dx/dt, d/dt, dozen/dt, would require a 4D manifold having 4 spatial dimensions and no time dimension. Now that is an interesting idea. 4 spatial dimensions. An idea I certainly would not object to. But time travel? Many suggest absolutely not. One of the amazing things about this time travel business is that a position in Einstein's space-time is usually represented by coord x, y, z. What this means is that every second a body moves exactly 299,792,458 meters, or a light second in the 4th dimension. This tool is convenient in explaining what is called a particle's light cone, because it allows the sides of the light cone to slope at 45 degrees. However, note that, using this convention, the 4th dimension is no longer a temporal dimension but a spatial one. Why? Because coord resolves to meters, not seconds. Does this mean that time travel is suddenly allowed? Of course not, since c is a constant, and t is not a variable. It is just that most relativists cannot bring themselves to the point of accepting a 4th spatial dimension. They are forever stuck with space-time for historical reasons. There is an unyielding mental barrier that I am still in the process of identifying. I wonder if it is just intellectual inertia or a vestige of the historical origin of relativity, kind of like the way an atom is not really an atom in the literal sense of the word. Somehow, I don't think so. By acknowledging the unchanging nature of Einstein's space-time, the vast majority of relativists would have to admit that they have been teaching crackpot science, the teaching of geometry as an explanation of gravity, from the beginning. That is unacceptable, of course. Still, it is no excuse to conjure up all sorts of witch doctor nonsense and retard progress in our understanding of gravity for close to a century without conclusive evidence that it is a force, and yet somehow has to be unidentified as to what it actually originates as. Note, the representation of a position in Einstein's space-time is conventionally given by igt, x, y, z, where I is the square root of -1, an imaginary number, crackpottery never-ending. However, this is a mere detail, one which does not take away from the changeless nature of Einstein's space-time. In addition to this, feedback through space disables simultaneity geometrically, as it is the cause for degrees of freedom, abbreviated df. For example, take a metal rod representing a line segment representing a section of space. If we were to enable the rod to self-rotate through a 360-degree circle, and continue to rotate the rod through every circle, it could possibly occupy equidistant from its center in one direction. It could then occupy all possible outcomes, forming a sphere, with the exception of the opposing direction. This would tend to indicate that the rod would have to come to a complete halt to begin the identical procedure. With this single direction, occupancy of all possible outcomes, the sphere formed by the rapid rotations revolving through every circle will pass through all combinations and permutations. Once such is done, all that can be done from here are repeats, delimited by feedback. Feedback here indicates PE. These repetitions are analogously similar to the repetitions of dice, only that the number of combinations and permutations until repetition transpires is much, much greater in number. Remember, this is equidistant from the center. Any repeat can be induced at any point through the combinations and permutations, so too analogous to dice, all numbers repeat. And similarly, like dice, they can are knowable and predictable via the repeats themselves, giving a 100% expectation. This would surely aid in solving of negative expectations related to table games. As such, let's explain how this works with die themselves before continuing. How many die rolls until you get a repeat? Dice tumble through human factors. They do not roll. Coin as such. What would be the expectation derived from the number of rolls, come-outs, until a standard casino die establishes a number having previously rolled? For instance, assume you roll 1, then 2, and then 1 again. The die repeated the slash or number 1 on the third roll. Or if toss 3, 2, 5, 2, then the resulting number 2 shows again. It took 4 rolls to see a repeat. What then is the average number of rolls until a die repeats a number? Solution. The first established come-out roll is a unique number and never a emphasis on a as opposed to the repeat, while the 7th roll always results in a repeated number. So the answer may be estimated to be somewhere in the middle, like 3.5. This is approximate. The exact answer is 1223/324, which is about 3.77. We can resolve the problem by working backward. When one has seen all 6 numbers appear, then we are guaranteed a repeat number in the one more roll. What then if we have seen 5 numbers? There is a 5/6 chance that a duplicate will next appear, in which case we are done in that one roll. And there is a 1/6 chance that a new number will appear, in which case we arrive at having seen 6 numbers, plus we add the roll that got us there. In other words, if X is the expected number of rolls after seeing X numbers, we have the following formula. E5 equals 5/6, 1 plus 1/6, 1 plus E6. E5 equals 1 plus 1/6. E6. E5 equals 1 plus 1 divided by 6. 1 equals 7/6. What if we have already seen 4 numbers? There is a 4/6 chance we will see a duplicate, in which case we are done in that one roll. And there is a 2/6 chance we will see a new number, in which case we get to the case of having seen 5 numbers, plus we add the roll that got us there. E4 equals 4/6, 1 plus 2/6, 1 plus E5. E4 equals 1 plus 2/6. E5. E4 equals 1 plus 1/6. 7/6 equals 25/18. Here is a pattern to the calculations. If there have been X numbers, next chance we see a new number, in which case we get to the case of having seen x plus 1 numbers, plus we add the roll that got us there. Thus, x equals x divided by 6, 1 plus 1 minus x divided by 6, 1 plus x plus 1, x equals 1 plus 1 dash x slash 6, x plus 1. Calculating, we can find D3 equals 61/36, E2 equals 115/54, E1 equals 899/324, and finally E0 equals 1223/324. So, when we start out minus and no numbers have yet been seen minus the expected number of rolls until we see a duplicate is E0 equals 1223/324, about 3.77. Using the recursive approach further can, of course, aid in the potential of wins over losses in abating a negative expectation in games of chance, provided we first understand that all numbers of the die are repetitious, and that is the basis of so-called probability. 2. Repeats therefore are seen not only in repetitious input caused by feedback, potentiality, that is potential energy PE so-called, but also in the instance of the example of the rapid spinning wad taking up residence in all circles to form a sphere, in one direction, equidistant from the center. Simultaneity therefore cannot be accomplished in both directions because of feedback, and to add, no matter how the rod itself is relocated, the rod re-establishes similar rotation, again equidistant from the center. The presence of feedback becomes immediately evident automatically to cause these regardless, both in repetitious input, see below for a full explanation, and the sphere. In assuming that feedback is closely related to gravity with respect to the system, indication has it that if gravity were assumed as being automatic, then it cannot be identified within mathematics yet, because the measurements are self-referential and value-based, originating from manual energy observations derived from an initial source, which is also based manually, forming the manual input to the system that results in repetitious input caused by the automatic feedback, in energy transfer establishing displacement. I know this is a mouthful, but read it again. This repetition extends to the example of the sphere equidistant from the center manifest through the rod. We can say that within our three-dimensional space, time as a function of energy, that feedback as gravity is the cause behind degrees of freedom wherein everything repeats at some point. This outlays any mass-occupying space. Distance is time, from the movements of a biological organism, right down to the total combinations and permutations of its eye movements, a cedar block to larger masses as those of planets and galaxies, etc., etc. There are just so many a mass can go through, and this is due to potentiality. How chemicals, atoms, and quantum energies interact. Everything repeats, because the automatic establishment of potentiality established through manual energy transfer was the oversight, and because it is so negligible it went unnoticed. It would be impossible then to isolate potential energy from its interdependency with energy. They cannot be undermined, and the fact is that they are expressions of each other, interdependent, especially absent of time travel with respect to that barrier caused by potentiality as it applies to the mass of energy rapidly traversing through outer space. From this it is clear that because of the instantaneous production of energy's feedback, potentiality, with the establishment of energy to a system, that self-referential measurements will not identify in exactly what gravity energy as it corresponds to mass powered with manual input that results in repetitious energy input to output. Assuming this, it can possibly be understood only through an automatic system, or automated symbolism disassociated from self-referential math based on manual energy observations, in the main perhaps absent of potentiality. In addition, there is another difficult problem in relation to this, that manual input of energy or energy itself cannot be automated in light of feedback resulting from energy transfer. In more direct terms, an infinite system of energies similar to the infinity mirror would have to be devised to resolve such a problem, even if the intent were to produce faster than light travel. This is because manual input against potentiality cannot overcome itself. If the manual input that turns to repetitious input to feedback were automatic, it might work, but this too would require the infinity mirror of infinite energies, each backing the other up from the first. A few considerations in this is that of somehow causing energy or to the system powered with energy to enable time traverse. If it could be done, it would then be entirely practical to cause such automation, because the energy could leave and arrive in a different space at the same time, which is also based to self-referential values, that is, an imaginary reference point indicative of position to mark of the arrivals and leavings about a rotating circumference, as opposed to arriving and leaving at the same position at the same time. So nothing but automated energy or some other unknown force, not to Gaians or Rovitans, they do not exist, can abate the manual input resulting in repetitious feedback that might cause the phenomena of advanced technologies capable of enabling superluminal transport, teleportation and the like, or how it can come about through an automated/automatic symbolism/system. Information is not four-dimensional only, bound to probabilities concerned with the delimitations of Einstein's space-time conforming to sets. Information theory, Shannon, 1948. If it were, then all information with respect to 4D space and higher echelons of space would of course be manually based and thereby bound exclusively to energy. Since this is understood, it too can only be grasped with respect to its origin, where it originates as opposed to knowledge.